Hey there friends, welcome to episode 33 of Knit Talk with a Tech Editor. I'm Megan of the Unapologetic Knitter and I'm a tech editor. Today we are going to be talking a little bit about my favorite methods for joining new yarn to a project. We're going to be doing a top-down demonstration of a couple of my preferred methods that have served me well for many years. I just want to be really upfront and say that these are by no means an exhaustive list of methods. It's really just one or two methods that I find the most effective for me. I would love to know if you try any of these, already use these, or if you have other methods that you really like that you use on projects that are worked both flat and in the round and at differing weights. And I'm going to cover all of that in today's episode. The simplest method you can use to join new yarn to your work is the same whether you're at the end of a row or whether you're in the middle of the row, whether you're working flat or in the round. You will drop your old tail. I usually leave about 6 inches of yarn so I can weave in the end easily. And I tuck it behind my work and just sort of hold it in place with my middle finger. Then, with the new yarn in my right hand, I'm going to start by inserting my needle into that stitch, placing a loop of yarn over the needle and pulling it through, and then simply proceeding with my new skein of yarn. Now the trouble with this is none of these tails are secured when you do this, so you do get a small difference in tension in your stitches. Because, like for this example, this is the edge of an armhole, so I'm going to be picking up stitches along that edge. I'm not too worried if that edge stitch doesn't have the same tension as the rest of the work. So I tend to use this method when I am working along a project that does not have an edge that will be visible to the public. When I'm working along a project that is done flat and will have a visible edge to the public, I do sort of a double stitch when I start the row. So with my tail yarn that will eventually be woven in, I will insert my needle and wrap the stitch just as if I was going to continue along the row in this old yarn. Then I will pick up my new yarn, loop it over that needle, and pull it through together with the old yarn. What this does is allows me to put the tension on the old yarn and the new yarn at the same time so that I can continue along the row without getting super sloppy edge stitches. You can always tug this down and keep it nice and tidy. Now, you have two options when it comes to working back in the other direction. What I tend to do is knit to the last stitch and knit only the yarn of the new color and drop the yarn of the old color off the needle. This then falls down to the previous row where you would have dropped it if you had not used it to knit this new stitch, but you maintain the tension of your edge stitch. It's just a little bit tidier. If you're not worried too much about your work being super tidy, you can knit to these last two loops, which we would consider one stitch, and work them together as a K2 tog or a knit two together. You do end up with a small bump in the old color yarn on the new row, but of course if your project is all the same color, then it's not really a problem. So my favorite method for joining a new yarn when I am mid-row is very much like the method that I use at the end of a row. I will insert my needle into the next stitch, wrap the yarn that I'm going to cut, grab the new yarn that I'm going to work with and loop it through so you end up with a double stitch. Then I'm going to continue along my row in my new color of yarn. In most cases, of course, these two yarns will be the same color, but for purposes of demonstration, I've used contrasting colors so you can see it more clearly. When you now come back to the work on the wrong side if you're working flat, or come across it again from the right side if you're working in the round, you have two choices. You can knit into just the stitch of the new yarn, pull it through, and drop this old loop off the needle, or you can work them together as a P2 tog or a knit 2 tog, depending on which side of your work you are on, and continue along the row. The nice thing about working them together as a knit 2 together or a purl 2 together is you can pull both of these tails and you get a nice secured join to your work. There's no difference in tension in any of your stitches. I find it easier to work a P2 tog or K2 tog if I'm really worried about the tension of my stitches. For example, if I'm working in a complicated lace work pattern. However, when I'm working with heavier yarns like a worsted weight like this in a stockinette stitch, I tend to go with the method of dropping the second stitch of the old yarn off. And here's why. When you're working your P2 tog or K2 tog, while it does give you the option to pull on your tails and make that join nice and snug, you do get a doubling up of your stitch. You've got your old purple and your new pink yarn double stacked on top of each other. Now, because this is for demonstration purposes, I used two different contrasting colors. The odds are probably pretty good that your colors will be the same. However, you do get a small difference in density of your fabric where you have that knit two together. I tend to prefer to save the knit two or purl two together method of joining yarns when I'm using sport weight yarns or lighter. Anything that might be DK weight yarn or heavier, I don't use the knit two together or purl two together method, simply because you get that difference in tension at that stitch, and it can be visually disrupting, especially if you're working over a very basic fabric like stockinette stitch. I just want to show you in part of my project where I have done this join using the method where I knit into the first loop and drop the old loop. You'll see you do end up with this loose set of stitches. This is on either side of where I joined the new yarn. However, I can give both of those tails a little tug and they sort of close back up, and when you weave in your ends, it's nice and tidy so you can weave them in on the other side of the work. To that end, I have got a video linked in the description below to my preferred methods for weaving in ends on projects. Okay friends, that's where we're going to leave it for today. I hope you had some fun taking a look at how I like to join new yarn to a project. And again, I would love your feedback and know if you have other techniques that you use that you love that help you get your projects looking the most polished they can be. So next week we're going to do something a little bit different. I am very fortunate enough that I get to go take a trip to see one of my besties for her 60th birthday this year. So she and my other girlfriend are going to join me, and we're going to do a little video together talking about knitting and see if they have any questions for me. We do spend a lot of time talking about knitting in our life, so it'll be fun to finally have us all together in the same space talking about it. It's been almost 2 years since we've seen each other face to face. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and as always, happy knitting.